Yo, my people, welcome back to brand new Techish. This week, I had a conversation with a great friend of mine called Andy Ayim. He is a venture capitalist, an angel investor. He's also an entrepreneur, and we cover a lot of great ground. He actually worked with Arlan Hamilton to create Backstage London, which was basically the London arm of her investments into diverse Black, Brown, LGBTQ founders, basically. So he's done a lot of amazing work. And this kind of conversation is for people who kind of want to know, like, what is angel investing? Should I angel invest? Is it a smart idea to angel invest? We also go into things like, yo, should I accept an MBE? And if you don't know what an MBE is and you're not British, basically it stands for Member of the British Empire. It's basically the highest honor you can get basically within the UK society. But a lot of Black people and a lot of brown people are not sure if they want to accept it just because obviously of the colonial ties. And he actually said that he's been asked questions on this podcast that he's never been asked before. So without further ado, please welcome Andy Ayim, the CEO of the Angel Investing School. For those at home who don't necessarily know, obviously you used to work as a VC, basically. You worked at Backstage Capital, the London accelerator. Obviously Arlan Hamilton, super duper pioneer,
Being on the show.
really pushing the whole idea of like, we need to get capital to underrepresented founders. What was that experience like? Basically being the managing director of Backstage London, essentially, like you picked 10 or 12 investments. Like, how was it easier than you thought it would be? Was it harder than you thought it would be? Like, what was that like?
It was really challenging, and I'll say for three reasons. One is because it felt at the time like the weight of the diversity angle was on all of our shoulders, because we were like the first of its kind in terms of funds that's invested into underrepresented founders and marketing that overtly. So we led the way for a lot of other funds that exist today, which is incredible. But at the time, it felt like, unfortunately, as a system, if we get it wrong, what is that going to mean for others? The second challenge was from the applications, there were so many non-technical founders seeking to build technical startups. And for me, it shows that we need to really invest more into these STEM pipelines to really get people on that track of developing the technical skills. And actually, in the last 7 years, I've seen a lot more improvement. I've seen so much more technical talent in a lot of top tech companies here in the UK and across Europe. And I think the third thing that I'd say is that even though we were investing $100,000 into each of these entrepreneurs, a lot of them struggled to close their funding round, which shows that it's a systemic problem. Like, we needed to get other people really galvanized and investing into the rounds. And that's what really inspired me initially to start the Angel Investing School. It was around, how can I close these rounds more efficiently? I can do if I had a network of angels that are value aligned, that want to back these entrepreneurs too. So I realized that insight actually through going through the struggle of trying to close the rounds for the founders on the program.
Yeah, you know what? It's wild that you're saying that you felt like there was the pressure for you guys to basically prove that this idea worked, that this was a worthwhile endeavor, because you were basically only backing 10 startups. And statistically speaking, 10 out of 10 startups, most of them won't work. Probably none of them will work. But the fact that there was enough pressure to be like, yo, we've got to pick, a Facebook or something like that. Like, that's insane. Like, how many 100 mediocre,
Absolutely.
white-led startups are there that go to absolute zero? How many VC funds, out of 10 get zero right, basically? So yeah, it's a big problem that there was so much pressure for you lot to get that right. But from somebody who was outside that whole thing, we were just bigging you up. We were so happy, because it was like, although it's so bad in the US, in the UK, it's horrible, man. There was nothing like it. Do you know what I'm saying? So big ups to Ireland and big ups to yourselves to kind of implementing it and kind of trying to push forward and make it happen. You know what? So you obviously see a lot of founders, and I actually feel sorry for you to a certain extent, because every time I go to like a networking event or a conference event and you're there, like every single young up and coming diverse founder is like, yo, let me get a minute of Andy's time. Like, and they either are kind of pitching you or they want you to kind of give feedback on their pitch. I know you probably asked for this life, innit? But like, what things do you see like where you're like, oh, not this again? Is there anything where you're like, oh, come on, you lot, like, how many times have I got explained? Don't do this. Like, what are the shortcuts that you now want to give people, so like next time they come up to you, they're ready?
Yeah, it's a great question. So firstly, I really empathize with the young people, because I know what it's like to be in their shoes, even though it's a long time for me, where you're looking for role models, you're looking for people that are accessible, you're looking for people that are just honest and approachable, that you can ask the questions to, so I know what it is to look up to someone and feel like I need a helping hand. And I would never have got into my career initially if I didn't have a mentor to show me the way. I think the challenge for me is that I've always had to think about, how can I scale myself? And that doesn't mean a startup necessarily, but it's small things that I've tried to do to make myself more accessible. Like one is writing content. Like I
Mm.
write content to share a lot of what I know and what I've learned so that actually thousands of people can benefit from it because I can't have coffee catch-ups with everyone. Like on my
Mm.
website, andyayim.com/podcast, I intentionally created that page to list all of the podcasts that I've been on so you can learn from what I've said rather than feel like you have to speak to me. And I can always tell when someone's heard of a podcast in the context of what they share with me versus someone that asks a question that I've actually answered a number of times.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is we're launching this platform, Open Angel, on the 15th of May. One side of the platform really is about getting started with angel investing, and it's for professionals to learn how they can get started. Everything from understanding the tax relief that's available in the UK to creating your investment thesis and joining your angel syndicates and doing your first deal. But the other side of the platform is fundraising from angels. And it's for founders to learn all of the tips and tactics that I share when I do workshops, like in terms of how you can put your best foot forward when raising from angels. Everything from the pitch deck and the story that you tell to really understanding where to find angels online and offline and how to make authentic connections before transacting and asking to raise. So these are the things that I was finding founders are either getting wrong a lot or asking me a lot when coming up to me in questions. So again, I'm trying to use this as a platform to scale myself and scale my impact and minimize the feeling that people have sometimes of, I need to speak to Andy or have time with Andy. He doesn't understand. I do understand.
Yeah, I love that. There is something to that in terms of just like, yeah, listen, if you when you're out there producing content, it allows you to impact and inform people without actually having to do those one-to-one coffee, you know what I'm saying, mentorship type stuff in it, which I personally believe is a lot of, it's very overrated as a person. Like if I'm coming up, maybe you would disagree, but most of the great information I got wasn't online. I'm gonna keep it a buck. Most of that great information was me reading a Paul Graham blog post, me watching Eric Ries talking about the lean startup, reading about that. It wasn't these one-to-one coffee meetings with people who probably don't have time and, you know what I mean, are super duper stretched. But I digress. So this whole thing about angel investing now, I'm hearing a change. At least I see it on Twitter. People are now saying you should now do one and done. What that means is, instead of raising an angel investment round, then trying to go to a VC to get seed round or Series A round, and then B, C, D, IPO, people are saying, yo, raise an angel investment round and then just go from there. Grow your business. You've been given 100K, 200K, go all the way to the end from there, basically, and build a $10 million, $20 million, $30 million business. Do you like the sound of that? Do you think that makes more sense, especially if people from our kind of community, to do something where it's like, listen, if you need money to start, that's cool. But don't necessarily go down this pipeline where every 6 months or a year you got your cup in hand, basically saying, please, sir, I need some more.
Yeah, I think like the data speaks for itself. Like VCs are not that into you. I know that a lot of founders don't like hearing that message.
Facts.
But if when I speak to the tier one VCs, the ones that are invested in a lot of companies that end up getting to Series A or going to get acquired or to unicorns, they invest in less than 1% of the deals that they see. So they're not really that into you.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, they say that banks, 26% of new businesses borrow from banks, whereas less than 1% raise money from a VC.
Yeah.
So the data itself is telling you that they're not that into you. Secondly, they're in the business of investing into companies that grow big enough to return their fund. So as they raise bigger funds, the stakes get higher and higher in terms of what an exit means. So if I have a £100 million fund and I only own 5% of your business from my investment, I need you to technically exit at a 4 billion or more valuation for me to get my 300 million in a return, a 3x return to my investors. Now, if that doesn't match your aspirations or your will, then I'm not that into you and you shouldn't be that into me.
Yeah.
VCs don't do a great job of the education gap, actually, in informing you around, we've raised this fund at this fund size, therefore these are the size of the exits or more if before you come and talk to us. Does that match your aspirations? The second thing I'll say is that if we're being honest with ourselves as founders, you need to really question your ambition and your aspiration.
100%.
For 1% of us, we want to go on these long-term global journeys of building something humongous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not going to be for the majority of us. For some of us, we have to say to ourselves, if I got acquired tomorrow for 50 million, is that going to make a life-changing impact on me? Is that going to allow me to have the runway to live out my dreams and pursue other interests that I have? And is that actually a great outcome for this position that I want to be in? Because I can generate generational wealth for 50 million, I promise you. And
100%.
being a majority owner of your business, a lot of that goes back to you. Whereas if you get diluted down too much by raising too much funding from too many institutional investors, you might actually end up with less than that person that exited for 50 million and was a majority owner of their business, because you've been diluted down so much, even though you exited for 500 million or 1 billion. So you really need to understand your outcomes and your ambition and really go down the path that suits that best. I think that the difficulty for a lot of founders, they feel like, I'm getting this off the ground and I need money to get to a certain stage.
Yeah, 100%. I got 2 horror stories. I know one person who raised a bunch of VC money. The company got sold for an amazing amount of money and he walked away with 0, basically, because he was so diluted. The other one is not somebody that I know, but I heard Sophia Amoroso, the founder of Nasty Girl Boss, talk about. She said that she had always bootstrapped her business. It was an e-commerce brand selling, clothes for men. It started off as an eBay store, went to her own kind of e-commerce platform. The VCs came to her because they saw that she had built a company doing $100 million in revenue. They were like, please take our money. She's like, okay, well, maybe this is what I'm meant to do. This is how you become a grown-up in business. Let me take their money. What happened next haunts my soul. Basically, there was an offer to buy her company for like a life-changing amount of sum. I don't know, it was under $1 billion, but it was a life-changing amount of sum. The VCs didn't relay that information to her because they were like, well, that's not going to get us our return. Let's, let's not even entertain that offer, basically. It was basically from Urban Outfitters, I believe. She didn't say, but I'm going to guess that's what it was. In the end, the company went to naught. She had to sell it for like much less. She walked away from the company with not a lot of kind of, value for what she had created, right? So that can happen. Your VC's incentives and your incentives are not the same. They want $1 billion outcome, multi-billion dollar outcome. You could be rich off a $50 million outcome, like you said. So yeah, be careful when you go down that road. And we have to be honest, like you said, how many of us want to run $1 billion company? I don't know anybody that wants to, like, you have to be nuts to want to run $1 billion company.
People management is really hard. Managing people are the assets and the value that creators in a business. They're also the things that are most difficult about a business. Like it's better that you test it out by going to work for a company and managing people and figuring out then whether it's for you or not, and to go on this journey to figure it out. And that's another thing that I'll say about our culture, Michael, is that a lot of us don't respect tours of duty and work at companies enough. You get so much network from there, you get so much knowledge from there, and you're getting paid to learn. It's like it's a Western mentality we've got here. If I was in a developing country, I'm hungry for those type of opportunities. I'm getting paid to learn, paid to network, and paid for the knowledge. So we really need to reframe this opportunity of getting paid to learn by going to work at companies. And that's where you really solve deep problems, because you become aware of this problem in procurement and how rubbish the procurement software is.
100%.
You start that procurement startup, which is like a Notion or a Trello for procurement, and then you sell it for 50 million. But you only gain that insight because you're so deep and working in these corporates. Does that make sense? So
100%.
Where do the roots of problems come from that you feel you're uniquely designed to solve? When someone's worked in procurement for 10 years and they solve a procurement problem, I tell you on paper, it looks like they're well suited to solve that problem.
Yeah. So like I'm now doing VC scout work, so I can invest in startups, and I love boring ideas. I'm gonna keep it real. When you're 18 to 23, a lot of your ideas, they're not gonna be that great. It's gonna be help you find an event, maybe like, skincare or hair. Stuff that basically is a widespread problem that loads of other people have tried to tackle because it's obvious, basically, right? When you work in a corporate environment and you start seeing, we need software that can make our office management procurement 10%, 20% more efficient. That's a boring ass problem, but that's where the gold is, and you are 100% right. And I am an absolute hypocrite because I did not do that. I left startups pretty soon to go do my own thing, and I got lucky in that sense that I found something that worked. But at the same time, like, I see that type of ideas that get pitched to me now, and I'm like, yo, they could have done with a few years working in some boring bank, because then they would have saw there's a SaaS tool that could have, that could change their whole family's lives, basically, right? That's a very good idea, a very great point you're making there about sourcing great ideas.
And Michael, you know what really reframed my mind and my, like, when I lived and worked in San Francisco in 2015, like, it blew my mind. Like, it taught me to think 10x and not 10%. And when I saw the type of problems people were solving, like, I remember this Israeli founder of Capriza, I think the startup was called, and I was working with their BD lead there as well as the founder. I think they were an Andreessen company, and it was through Andreessen that we got to them. But they used to produce basically this UX workflow software that sits on top of poor UX ERP systems like Oracle. So we know
Damn.
Oracle's ugly and these workflows are ugly. So we created something really beautiful that sits on top of that allows you to enter data into those systems and extract data from those systems. You see that specific problem? That is genius.
Yeah, it is.
But you only understand that level of detail around a problem if you spend time deep enough in that problem space rather than, like you said, solve for the obvious.
Yeah, and then also, we were speaking off mic about B2C versus B2B. And I've primarily worked B2B in terms of revenue generation, but I've built a community that's B2C in that sense. But we all know, every founder who's been around for at least 5 to 10 years is like, listen, B2C is basically, it's basically, B2C is basically impossible. It's basically, it's literally almost so impossible.
Hard.
Like, it's so hard.
And the marketing cost to acquire customers B2C, like 40% of a VC round, they say goes to Google and Facebook because of ads.
Honestly, the only guys that are making money in B2C are the guys that are helping you with your Facebook ads. And maybe Facebook and Google. Apart from that, and there's a lot of great companies that help you with your Facebook ads and your Google.
So many
are
unprofitable. So many B2C are unprofitable. Yeah,
the cost of acquisition
they even get acquired as unprofitable businesses. Instagram, WhatsApp, they were unprofitable, but they were great businesses. Sticky, Twitter, unprofitable.
Yeah, but how many of us are going to
really understand that?
Yeah, and how many of us are going to be able to build a company that is going to get acquired by a handful of companies? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, so yeah, I always try to recommend, if you can, B2B. And that basically also ties into what we were saying about having that corporate experience. Because a business will spend money. They will write you a £10,000 check, $10,000, $20,000 check, and they won't blink if it will add an incremental value to their company. You get 20 of those contracts, you get 20 or 30 of those contracts in a year. And you might not be Bill Gates, but you're comfortable. You might be comfortable. Do you know what I'm saying? Especially if it's a software solution and not necessarily a one-to-one solution. Yeah. So please, my people, look into B2B if you can.
And I want to say a disclaimer, Michael, because I don't want to come like we're haters. Like, we're not trying to hate.
We're trying to guide people, bro. It's not hate. We 100%. Love everyone here. Yeah.
And for every one entrepreneur, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of employees. So we can't hate the life of being an employee when actually there's only one person that's the CEO and the founder. Actually, there's a COO, there's a CMO, who's building out their experience to become part of a C-suite. That's the pathways I'm interested in. Where's that talent that's getting nurtured and wants to be the CMO, wants to be the CFO? Because in the future, when you get that capital and you start acquiring businesses, you're going to call that to come and fill in those roles, right? So we need people of all of these disciplines to really level up in the culture so that we can actually have this talent network that we're building up,
100%.
Not everyone's meant to be the entrepreneur.
Look, Tim Cook is richer than 99% of all entrepreneurs that will ever walk this earth. This guy did not start nothing. He's an optimizer and he's very talented and he works hard. He probably works like an entrepreneur, but he didn't take any of those risks. He just, climbed his way up and was a valuable asset to his company. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with being an employee. And I think most people are lying to themselves about this whole, I want to be a boss. It looks cool on the gram, but everyone wants to be a boss until it's payroll time. I was doing payroll thing and I'm like, I'm writing some mad checks and it hurts me. I mean, I obviously want to pay my employees. I love them, but I'm also just like, damn, bro, I got to cough up big money every month here. Yeah. And that's not the side that you see on Instagram and TikTok 100%. And whatever, boss life and all that. Yeah, we covered a lot of ground, man. You know what? So on a more personal note, I've definitely admired all the work that you've done and I'm always taking notes when I see your strategy on marketing on LinkedIn and everything. But just to flip it on a more personal note, I have to ask you this because I've always wanted to ask somebody who has what you have, and not everyone who has what you have has come on this platform before. So basically,
I know what you're gonna ask about.
To MBE or not to MBE? So that is the question we have to ask basically, because me and Abadesi have had this debate for a long time basically, and it's been a nuanced debate where I've said probably not, and Abadesi says probably yes. Yeah. But the thing is, I don't necessarily want to ask your thought process on that. I want to ask what has been the value of it in the sense of, have you noticed it open more doors? Do you notice a certain aura when you walk into the room now? People are a bit more thinging maybe when they once were. What's your thoughts?
So do I feel like I've been treated any differently after receiving an MBE? I do think it credentializes you in British culture. So when I've gone into these big corporates that I work with, I often get people pull me aside, sometimes even privately, to be like, oh, you did so well to get that. The truth is, I don't even know who nominated me for it. And I know you didn't ask about the thought process and deciding whether to receive it or not, but I do think it is important for people to understand that I think everyone as individuals draws lines of convenience and boundaries that are right for them.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So for some people, it's like Britain's colonial past. I can't get past that. I would never accept an MBE. For other people, I would never accept an MBE, but I'm happy to be a taxpayer here. I'm happy to live here. I'm happy to benefit from the education, and that's my boundary. For other people, it's like it's either one way or the other. I either exit the country fully because of the colonial past, or I'm here fully. So I
Yeah.
think everyone's got a different line of like where they're comfortable with, and I totally respect that. For me, it was quite important in that I know that some people look up to me as a role model. So anything that can amplify that in a positive way is really helpful. And when I look at my lineage in terms of my parents, like migrating from Ghana to UK, this is such an incredible feedback loop for my family back home to feel like this was time well spent coming to UK and look at the fruits of the labor in terms of the children that were produced from my parents coming here. So I'm not going to labor on it too much, but for me personally, I do feel like it's a positive feedback loop and an appreciation and a recognition. But beyond that, I don't think about it day to day and often forget to even put it in my signature.
I hear it. Yeah, you know what? I think what you said there is completely true. And it's easy for me, who's somebody who has never been like nominated for it, to say, oh, I would do this. Who knows what I might do? If it came to me and I'm like, you know what, Mumsy's telling me, please take it, I probably might do. Who knows, innit? I don't think I would, but it's
Can I share something as well, Michael?
Yeah, go on.
Like I do a lot of executive coaching and leadership development work, and I think sometimes people think very linear in terms of, oh, but have you been a CEO? Have you led at a large company? But actually, when you think about leadership traits, there's so many different ways that you can lead in your lived experience. And for me to lead the way in diversity and inclusion in the technology sector and to be awarded an MBE is something that really feeds into a lot of the way that I show up and do the work that I do now. And there's a famous poem by Theodore Roosevelt called Man in the Arena. And I'd encourage readers to Google it and to read it, because it talks about like when you're in the stands, you can heckle, you can laugh, you can have an opinion, you can judge. But when you're in the pit and you're in the arena and you're the one sweating and you're the one that's about to fight, yeah, it's a different feeling. So
100%.
when you're the man in the arena, like there's a different weight and gravitas to who you are and what you do and how you show up. So I think that's a really good poem that reminds people of that analogy of like having an opinion and being far removed versus actually being in the arena yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Abadesi loves that quote. He always quotes it. I kind of chuckled when you said it because I was like, the audience has heard this quote a lot, because it's true. The critic doesn't really matter. Don't get twisted. It's about what are you doing with your life and what results are you trying to get and your battles. And nobody knows your battles. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I know so many founders whose parents are sick and they're hustling to make things happen, and then they're going on Twitter and people are trying to take them down, and you're like, come on, man, you don't know what someone's really going through. So you've probably done more for the culture in terms of pushing forward and promoting Black entrepreneurship, Black tech entrepreneurship, Black tech investing in the UK than most people. I'd say you put you in the top percentile of that 100%. Do you ever get tired when you see, for example, like an Oja doesn't work, and then all of a sudden everyone's just jumping on that person, or this startup doesn't work, or this founder didn't do things right, and it's not that groundswell of support that you might see in the US, where people are like, entrepreneurship is risky, it probably ain't gonna work. Whereas here, it feels like there's a level of hateration that I can't co-sign. How do you feel about that?
You see, I think this is a really important topic about the culture of entrepreneurship, because when I went to the US, it was a badge of honor to fail. It's seen as a learning experience. It's seen as something that feeds into your next experience so you can move more intelligently moving forward. In the UK, if we do this behavior where it's like, oh, how could you fail? Or if I knew it was going to fail because of X, Y, or Z, or that was really irresponsible, how can you raise all of that money? It doesn't encourage others to go. I feel like I don't want to do that, because if that's how people treat me if I fail, then I don't want to even tell them that I'm doing it, let alone tell them that I fail. When what we really should be doing is really paying attention to lessons learned. Actually, what went well? What didn't go so well? What could I do differently going forward? And that's where the value is. It's never truly a failure if we extract lessons from the experience. And we need a supportive culture that is good at nurturing that safe space where we can honestly fail, be picked back up again, and be supported along the journey. And that's something that really needs to shift in terms of our culture and perspective about entrepreneurship. I've learned so much from my failures in life. I wouldn't be the man that I am today if I wasn't able to extract lessons and use that to move on and moving more intelligently moving forward. So you've touched on a really important cultural shift that's important in this country.
What would you change about the culture then if you would say, okay, these are a few things that I think we should work on beyond just like accepting failure? Is there anything else?
Yeah, I do. I think when you come from sometimes an immigrant family or an African or Caribbean background, sometimes it's this respect culture where we don't like
Mm,
speaking about ourselves too big. We don't challenge authority. We're taught not to do that growing up. So you have to kind of get this balance right of what am I unlearning versus the things that I keep and honor as I grow and go through this journey. And what you find is sometimes entrepreneurs, our identities get too caught up in the business. So it becomes hard to separate ourselves from that business. So a lot of people know me for the angel investing school in recent years. Before that, people knew me as the product guy because I was the head of
mm,
product management in the start. Before that, people knew me as a management consultant. Before that, they knew me as the founder of Mixtape Madness. The reason that I share that is because we all have the power to reinvent ourselves and control our identities and how we're perceived. Right. In the next coming few years, people will know me as that leadership development and that executive coaching guy that loves to talk about helping leaders be more human at work. I have agency and control on how I'm perceived and the narrative that I want to share with you because I recognize that to be a full expression of myself, we're going to know the different facets of that make me up. Whereas a lot of us were coached and socialized to believe that there's one version of ourselves to put out in the world. So we get to a networking event or we go to who are you or what do you do or can you introduce yourself? Hi, I'm Andy and I work as X. It's the wrong way to lead a discussion. That's
mm.
not really memorable. And when you get that conviction over who you are and what you do, like I love creating pathways to opportunity through entrepreneurship. That's what I do. The different ways in which I do that is through the angel investing school and through X and through Y and through Z. Like that's exactly who I am and how I express myself. I think there's a real shift in how we view our identities culturally and then how we portray ourselves and therefore communicate ourselves either through social media, through content or at events or when speaking to people, even on a one-on-one.
Yeah, completely co-signed that one. I had a TikTok that went viral because I was talking about how like some of the cultural norms that we got taught growing up in kind of inner city London was basically set up to make us broke. Like you would
Love
say,
that.
oh, that person is too bait. Now that person's the one with the network. That's the person you want. When you haven't got a job, you're going to call them and say, yo, do you know
Tell
this
them.
person? But there was this idea that you shouldn't be too friendly. You shouldn't talk to a person that you don't necessarily know. And if you did, it was weird. And that one kind of mental framework I saw, stifle so many people. Like it was like, yo, like, don't be embarrassed to go up to somebody and just introduce yourself and say hello and be curious and learn. And that was something I had to get over quite quickly. But I know that was like some hardware embedded in me that was a recipe for brokenness, I'll be honest with you. But yeah, just to wrap that one up, where can we find you? What is the place to go? What can we plug? Plug City.
Yeah, so openangel.co.uk. That's launched on the 15th of May. I want everyone to check that out because it's going to
Mm-hmm.
be our way of scaling ourselves and democratizing access to fundraising from angels and angel investing and getting started along that journey. So I'm really excited to share that with the world. I want everyone to check that out. And of course, if you want those kind of like daily reminders, tips, insights on the journey of being an entrepreneur and a leader, I share so much on LinkedIn and on my personal newsletter. So if you just Google Andy Ayim, you'll see a ton of that come up.
Love it. All right, everyone. Catch you next week. Peace.